Elara lived in a small quiet house on the edge of town, a place where the air always smelled faintly of earth and sun-warmed petals. She was a woman woven from gentle smiles and quiet strength, her face a map of wrinkles that told tales of laughter and the occasional tear. Most of her days were spent among her plants, the sprawling garden that embraced her home like a loving green hug. It was more than just a garden. It was her world, her canvas, her oldest friend. Roses bloomed in riotous colors near the porch, their perfume a sweet cloud. Lavender swayed in soft purple waves, and beyond, rows of plump tomatoes ripened under the summer sun, their leaves a vibrant green. Elara was in her element, kneeling by a bed of marigolds, carefully plucking a stubborn weed, when a sleek dark car, unlike any she usually saw in her modest neighborhood, glided to a stop at the curb. Her brow furrowed slightly. Visitors were rare, especially ones driving vehicles that looked like they belonged on a magazine cover. She watched as a man emerged from the car. He was tall, dressed in dark, expensive-looking clothes that seemed too formal for a summer afternoon. Large, dark sunglasses hid his eyes, giving him a mysterious, almost unapproachable air. His dark hair was styled in a way that seemed both neat and wild at the same time. He looked important out of place, like a brightly colored bird that had accidentally flown into a quiet brown wren's nest. He stood for a moment just looking at her house, his gaze sweeping over the vibrant explosion of her garden. Elara felt a prickle of curiosity, mixed with a tiny bit of unease. She wasn't used to strangers, especially not ones who looked like they'd stepped right out of a movie screen. He started walking slowly towards her front gate, his steps measured and deliberate. Elara straightened up, brushing dirt from her knees. She watched him approach, a silent question in her posture. Was he lost? Was he looking for someone else? The thought made her heart beat a little faster, a tiny drum in her chest. When he reached the low wooden gate, he paused. His sunglasses remained, making it impossible to read his expression. He just stood there, looking at her, then at the roses, then back at her. The silence stretched thick and warm, broken only by the buzzing of bees around the lavender. Finally he spoke, his voice surprisingly deep, with a soft, southern lilt that reminded Elara of warm summer nights. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, and even through the sunglasses she felt the intensity of his gaze. Is this 142 Maple Drive?" Elara blinked. "No, young man," she replied, her voice gentle, a little raspy with age. "This is 140. Maple Drive doesn't have a 142. Perhaps you're looking for Oak Street. There's a 142 there." She pointed a wrinkled finger towards the end of her street. He shifted, a faint sigh escaping him. "Right?" he murmured, more to himself than to her. He didn't seem annoyed, just tired. "My apologies, ma'am. I must have gotten my directions mixed up." He hesitated, his eyes lingering on the riot of colors and textures in her garden. "Your garden? It's truly something else." Elara's eyes softened. Her garden was her pride and joy. "Thank you," she said, a small smile gracing her lips. She waited, expecting him to turn and leave, to continue his search for 142 Oak Street. But he didn't. He just stood there, mesmerized by the blooms, a strange, wistful look on his hidden face. The sun beat down warm and golden as the unexpected visitor remained at her gate, captivated by the simple beauty of her world. Elara stood by the gate, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. The young man, still cloaked in the mystery of his sunglasses, seemed to be in no hurry to leave. He took a slow, deep breath, and Elara could almost imagine him inhaling the sweet scent of her roses, a stark contrast to the exhaust fumes and city smells he must usually encounter. "It's incredible," he said again, his voice softer this time, a hint of genuine awe in it. He gestured vaguely at the overflowing flower beds. "All this, did you do it yourself?" Elara chuckled, a low, rustling sound like dry leaves. "Yes, dear, every bit of it. Been working on it for over 50 years, ever since my husband and I bought this little house." She paused, then added, "It's a bit of a lifelong project, you might say." He nodded slowly. 50 years, he repeated, as if trying to grasp the concept of such long-term dedication. That's something. He took another breath. Then, finally, almost hesitantly, he pushed the gate open a crack. "Would you mind if I just stepped inside for a moment, just to get a closer look? I promise I won't disturb anything." Elara's first instinct was caution. She lived alone, but there was something in his voice, a weary sincerity, that disarmed her. He didn't seem threatening, just curious and lonely, perhaps. She remembered her mother's saying, "A garden gate is meant to be opened." "Of course, dear," she said, stepping aside. "Come on in, just watch your step on the path. Some of the flagstones are a bit uneven." He entered the garden, moving with a fluid grace that seemed almost too practiced. He took off his sunglasses then, and Elara gasped softly. His eyes were a startling blue, intense and deep, surrounded by dark lashes. They held a raw, almost haunted quality, like someone who had seen too much or perhaps too little of what truly mattered. A faint, tired smile touched his lips. "John," he offered, holding out a hand. "My name's John." Elara took his hand. His grip was firm, surprising gentle. "Elara," she replied. "Elara Maeve." "Elara," he repeated, letting the name roll off his tongue. He looked around the garden again, his eyes lingering on a particularly vibrant red rose. It's so peaceful here, my world. It's not usually like this." He sighed, a deep, weary sound. I'm a singer, you see. Travel a lot. Big crowds. It's loud." He chuckled, a humorless soundly. "Oh, a singer, are you? Well, I suppose that would be noisy. I had a nephew once played the trumpet, always practicing. Bless his heart. Used to shake the whole house." She smiled, remembering. "Do you sing rock and roll, dear? Or more of the country tunes?" She knew the names of a few famous singers, the ones her grandchildren sometimes hummed. Frank Sinatra, Patsy, Celine, but the modern ones, the loud ones, were mostly a blur. John's blue eyes flickered, a hint of surprise in them. "Rock and roll, ma'am," he said, a small, almost imperceptible hesitation before the words. "Mostly rock and roll." He seemed to be waiting for something, a flicker of recognition, a widening of her eyes. But Elara just nodded again, her gaze drifting back to her beloved roses. "Ah, rock and roll," she mused. "That's the loud kind, isn't it? Well, I do prefer a quiet hymn myself, but I'm sure you make many people happy with your music, John." She didn't connect the famous king of rock and roll to this tired, handsome man standing in her garden. She simply saw a young man, a stranger who appreciated her flowers and seemed in need of a moment of quiet. The understanding between them wasn't based on fame or identity, but on the simple, shared pleasure of a beautiful, sunlit garden. John stood transfixed by the vibrant red rose Elara had been tending. Its petals were a deep, velvety crimson, and droplets of dew still clung to them, catching the morning light like tiny diamonds. He reached out a hand almost hesitantly and gently touched one of the silken petals. Texture was softer than anything he usually encountered. "This one," he murmured. "It's magnificent. What kind is it?" Elara's face brightened, her eyes crinkling at the corners. His genuine interest was like a ray of sunshine. "That, dear, is a deep secret rose," she explained, her voice filled with quiet pride. "It's a hybrid tea, very fragrant. Takes a lot of looking after, mind you, pruning in the spring, feeding every few weeks, and you have to watch out for the aphids, tiny little pests." She spoke with a practiced ease, as if giving a beloved lecture. He listened, really listened, his brow slightly furrowed in concentration. "Aphids?" he asked, a hint of genuine curiosity in his tone. "How do you get rid of them?" Elara laughed, a soft, warm sound. Oh, there are sprays, of course, but I prefer natural methods. A good, strong spray of water from the hose often does the trick. Or sometimes, if I'm feeling particularly patient, I'll pick them off by hand. The ladybubs help too. She leaned down, plucking a wilting leaf from a nearby stem. Every plant has its challenges, you see, just like every person. He straightened up, his blue eyes fixed on her. You picked them off by hand? He repeated, a hint of disbelief in his voice. That must take a long time. A tiny aphid, a new bud, the way the light catches a spider web. She gestured around her with a graceful sweep of her hand. This garden, it teaches you patience and resilience. Things don't always go as planned, but you keep trying, keep nurturing, and mostly they come back stronger. John looked around at the thriving plants, then back at Elara. Her words seemed to hang in the air, simple yet profound. His own life was anything but quiet. It was a constant rush of demands, of adoring crowds and flashing cameras, of loud music and louder expectation. There is very little room for quiet thought, let alone the patient plucking of tiny pests. He was surrounded by people, yet often felt intensely alone. Here in this garden, with this gentle woman, he felt a strange sense of calm settling over him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. He found himself asking another question, a truly genuine one, not a polite pleasantry. Do you ever get tired of it all, this work? Elara smiled, her eyes twinkling. And sometimes, she added, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, the best secrets are whispered by the wind through the leaves. John stood there listening to her quiet wisdom, completely absorbed. The sounds of traffic from the distant road faded. The pressures of his world seemed to shrink, replaced by the humming of bees and the rustle of leaves. He had come here perhaps looking for directions, but he had stumbled into something far more profound. A sanctuary, and a gentle teacher who spoke of life through the simple, honest language of her beloved garden. As Elara continued to talk about her garden, John found himself drawn deeper into her world. She led him along a winding flagstone path past patches of bright phlox and tall hollyhock. She spoke of the rosebush her late husband Thomas had planted for her on their 10th anniversary. He wasn't much of a gardener, bless his heart, she reminisced, her voice soft with affection. But he loved to see me happy. This bush, it struggled a bit at first. I thought it wouldn't make it. But I kept at it, kept feeding it, talking to it, even, and look at it now. She pointed to a robust bush heavy with fragrant pink blooms. It outlived him by many years. A reminder of his love still growing. John listened, his usual restless energy quieted by her calm presence. Pictured Thomas a man he'd never met through Elara's loving words. He saw the struggle of the rosebush, and the resilience of a love that continued to bloom. His own life felt so transient, so fleeting. Relationships were often superficial moments of connection, quickly overshadowed by the demands of his career. Here was a love that had lasted, cultivated, like the garden itself. She showed him a patch of herbs, rosemary, thyme, basil. My grandchildren love to pick these when they visit, she explained. We make lemonade with the mint, my oldest granddaughter. She's off to college next year, studying to be a nurse. She helped me plant this whole section when she was just a little thing. Her eyes shone with pride. The garden grows and the children grow too. It's a lovely thing to watch. He imagined children's laughter echoing through the garden, the sticky sweetness of mint lemonade. His own childhood felt 1,000,000 miles away, a blur of poverty, and then sudden, overwhelming fame. He rarely had such simple, grounded experiences anymore. Every interaction was filtered through the lens of who he was or who people expected him to be. But Elara saw none of that. She simply saw a young man interested in her plants. There was a terrible storm once, Elara continued, her voice taking on a more serious tone as they reached a gnarled old apple tree at the back of the garden. A few years after Thomas passed, the wind howled like a banshee's. This old tree, it was battered, lost a big branch. I thought for sure it was done for my neighbor, bless his heart. Told me to cut it down. Said it was too much trouble. She patted the rough bark of the trunk gently. But I couldn't. This tree, it gives the best apples, makes the sweetest pies. So I pruned it, patched it up as best I could, and slowly it healed. It's a bit crooked now, but it still bears fruit more resilient than I gave it credit for. John reached out and touched the gnarled trunk of the apple tree. He understood. He knew what it felt like to be battered by storms, to feel like you might not make it, to be told to give up. He knew what it meant to bear fruit even when crooked, to keep going despite the scars. Elara's simple stories told through the language of her plants resonated deeply within him. He forgot about the concert he was supposed to plan, the record he was supposed to cut, the managers waiting impatiently for his return. He forgot the constant hum of his own fame. He was just John, a listener, learning about resilience from an old apple tree, and quiet strength from a woman who cultivated life with her own two hands. The garden wasn't just a collection of plants, it was a living history, a testament to a life well lived, and a balm for a weary soul. The sun climbed higher, casting dappled shadows through the leaves. But neither Elara nor John seemed to notice the passage of time. They moved slowly through the garden, Elara pointing out different plants, explaining their needs, their histories, and their little quirks. John followed, a silent, attentive presence, his blue eyes taking in every detail. They stopped by a small, bubbling bird bath, where sparrows dipped and splashed. Elara spoke of the different birds that visited, identifying their songs, telling tales of cheeky squirrels who tried to raid the bird feeder. John found himself smiling genuinely, a rare, unforced smile that reached his eyes. He usually heard the roar of applause, the clamor of the crowd. Here, the loudest sound was the gentle trill of a robin. "This little corner," Elara said, gesturing to a secluded bench. "This is where I come when I need to think, or when I don't want to think at all, just to be." John walked over and sat on the bench. It was cool against his skin, worn smooth by years of use. Elara joined him, sitting with a comfortable sigh. Peaceful silence settled between them, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the rustle of the willow's long branches. It wasn't an awkward silence, but a shared one, a moment of deep, unspoken understanding. John closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in the rich, earthy scent of the garden mixed with the sweet perfume of the flowers. He felt the sun warm on his face, the soft breeze on his skin. It was an overwhelming sense of calm, a feeling he hadn't realized. He was so desperately missing. His life was so scheduled, so public, so controlled. She simply sat beside him, her gaze sweeping over her beloved plants, a serene expression on her face. She enjoyed the company, the quiet presence of a young man who wasn't demanding or loud, who simply appreciated the beauty she had created. It was a rare treat, a gentle moment of connection with a kindred spirit, even if their worlds were entirely different. He opened his eyes, feeling lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "This is thank you, Elara," he said, his voice low and sincere. "This is more peaceful than anything I'd known in a long time." Elara patted his hand, a warm, comforting gesture. "Sometimes," she said, her voice soft, "what we truly need is not to find something grand, but to rediscover the quiet beauty in the small things. This garden, it's just a collection of plants, but it holds so much life, so many stories if you just take the time to look and listen." He nodded, looking at her, then back at the vibrant tapestry of the garden. He saw it differently now. Not just as pretty flowers and green leaves, but as a testament to patience, to resilience, to quiet love. An hour had passed, perhaps more, since he had first pulled up to her curb. An hour that had transformed from a simple search for directions into an unexpected journey of the soul. He felt an urge to stay, to linger in this bubble of peace, but he knew deep down that his other world was waiting, calling him back to its noise and demands. For now, though he would cherish this shared solitude, this tranquil moment that felt like a quiet blessing, the sun continued its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of soft orange and pink. John knew his time. in Elara's peaceful garden was drawing to a close. He stretched, feeling a satisfying ache in his muscles, a result of the unexpected hours spent walking and standing rather than the usual rushed schedule of his life. He looked at Elara, truly seeing her. Her white hair pulled back neatly was like a soft cloud around her face. Her hands, though gnarled with age and work, were gentle and expressive as she gestured. There was a quiet dignity about her, a strength that came from living a life close to the earth. "You know, Elara," he said, "a thoughtless. She had a small garden, too, nothing quite like this, but she loved her roses. I remember her telling me stories similar to yours, about the struggles and how the plants just keep coming back." He paused, a wistful look in his blue eyes. "I haven't thought about that in years. It's funny how a place can bring back so many memories." Elara smiled. "Gardens are good for that. They're anchors, dear. They root us to what's real." She looked at him more closely. "You remind me a bit of my grandson, actually. Not in looks. No, he's got hair like spun gold. But in the way you listen, he's a thoughtful boy, that one. Always asking questions. Always interested in how things work." She tilted her head slightly. "You have a certain presence about you, John. An intensity like you carry a lot on your shoulders." John shifted uncomfortably, a flicker of his public persona momentarily appearing. "Well, ma'am," he began, "my work, it can be demanding. There are a lot of people, a lot of expectations." He thought about saying more, about revealing who he truly was, if only to see her reaction, to break through the ordinary for a moment. But then he stopped himself. Peace he'd found here was precisely because she didn't know. She saw him, not the image. "I sing for a living, you see." He tried, just a subtle hint. "People come from all over to hear me. Sometimes it feels like the whole world is listening." He watched her face carefully, waiting for a spark, a tiny flicker of recognition. Elara nodded slowly, her expression unperturbed. "Well, that sounds like a mighty big responsibility, dear," she said kindly. "To have so many people listening. I suppose you must be very good at it then, to draw such crowds. Is your music on the radio much?" John felt a strange mix of relief and a faint, almost humorous disappointment. She truly had no idea. It was refreshing. Honestly, he nodded. "Yes, ma'am, quite a bit. You might even have heard a song or two perhaps without knowing it was me." He grinned, a genuine unburdened grin. "Though I doubt they play much rock and roll on the quiet stations you listen to." Elara chuckled. "No, not much, dear. I prefer the old hymns and the news, but I'm sure you're very popular. You have a very kind voice, John. I imagine that helps with singing." He was just a kind stranger, a thoughtful young man who listened, and in that for him was a profound gift. He glanced at his watch, the expensive gold glinting in the fading light. The hour had stretched, blending into two, perhaps even more. His world would soon be calling, demanding his return. But for this precious time he had been just John and she, simply Elara, sharing stories among the blossoms, completely unaware of the legend standing quietly in her garden. The mystery of her quiet world held a far greater allure than the noisy fame he carried. As the afternoon light softened, Elara rose from the bench under the willow tree. "Well, John," she said, her voice gentle, "it's been a lovely visit. I hope I haven't kept you from your other plans." John stood too, feeling a reluctant tug towards his own reality. "Not at all, Elara," he said, his voice sincere. "This has been exactly what I needed. More than you know." He looked around, feeling a strange reluctance to leave. His eyes fell on a cluster of small, vibrant petunias near the path. "These are beautiful," he remarked. "So many colors." Elara's eyes followed his gaze. "Oh, those are quite easy to grow. Actually, very cheerful. And they don't mind a bit of neglect, which is good for those of us who forget to water every day." She reached down and, with surprising dexterity, pinched off a small cutting from one of the petunias. "Here," she said, holding it out to him. "If you put this in a glass of water, it'll root. Then you can plant it a little piece of the garden to take with you." John stared at the small green stem with the delicate purple flower. He was used to being given gifts. Expensive watches, custom-made guitars, keys to cities. This simple living thing, offered with such quiet generosity, felt infinitely more precious. He almost didn't know what to do with it. His life was not set up for nurturing small plants. "Oh, Elara," he said, a genuine warmth spreading through him. "You don't have to." "Nonsense," she replied, pressing the cutting into his hand. "It's a small thank you for your kind company. Not many young people these days take such an interest in an old woman's garden." She smiled. "Besides, everyone should have a little bit of green in their lives. It reminds you to slow down, to be patient." He took the cutting carefully, holding it as if it were made of spun glass. "Thank you," he said again, his voice a little husky. I'll take good care of it." He gestured, placing it in a glass, watching the roots grow. It was such a simple, grounding act. "Now, if you want it to truly thrive," Elara began, launching into a gentle lesson on plant care, "make sure it gets plenty of sunlight, but not too much direct afternoon sun. When it's young, and good drainage, very important. Don't let its feet get wet, as I like to say." She spoke with a quiet passion, her face animated as she shared her wisdom. John listened intently, absorbing every word. He asked questions about soil types, about watering schedules, about what to do if the leaves started to yellow. It was a completely new world to him, far removed from the complex contracts and staging designs he usually dealt with. This conversation was simple, pure, and utterly real. They walked slowly back towards the front gate, the petunia cutting a fragile symbol of their unexpected connection. It wasn't just a plant, it was a seed of friendship, a quiet gesture that bridged two vastly different worlds. John felt a lightness in his chest, a sense of quiet joy that had been missing for too long. He knew he had found something truly special in Elara's garden, a balm for his weary soul, and a reminder of the quiet beauty that existed far from the spotlight. Clutched the cutting gently, feeling the rough texture of the stem, a tangible link to the peace he had found. As they approached the front gate, the sun began to dip lower, painting the sky in deep purples and fiery oranges. The golden hour, photographers called it, the time of day that made everything glow. But for John, it was also a reminder of the ticking clock, the world waiting outside the peaceful bubble of Elara's garden. His expensive car, still parked at the curb, looked starkly out of place against the backdrop of her modest home. The very sight of it pulled him back, a cold splash of reality. He imagined his manager probably pacing by the phone, wondering where he'd disappeared. The schedules, the contracts, the demanding fans, the relentless pressure to be Elvis. It all started to press in on him again, a heavy weight settling back onto his shoulders. The lightness he had felt, the pure peace, began to fade, replaced by the familiar gnawing anxiety. He thought of the constant travel, the sterile hotel rooms, the artificiality of celebrity life here. Everything was real. The dirt under his fingernails, the scent of the earth, the genuine smile of a woman who saw him for who he was, not who he was supposed to be. He found himself wishing he could just stay, just exist in his garden, breathing in the quiet beauty, learning from Elara's simple wisdom. He pictured himself, a completely different man, perhaps tending to a small plot of land away from the screaming crowds and the flashing lights. The fantasy was so appealing, so utterly out of reach. Elara, with her quiet perceptiveness, seemed to sense the change in him. The subtle tightening of his jaw, the way his gaze became a little distant, less focused on the flowers, and more on something unseen. She didn't pry, didn't ask. She just looked at him with gentle, understanding eyes. "It sounds like you have a busy life, John," she said softly, her voice compassionate. "A lot on your mind." He nodded, a sigh escaping him. "More than I can usually quiet," he admitted, looking at her. "This place, you have no idea what a breath of fresh air it is, Elara. He gestured vaguely towards the garden, then towards his car. My world, it's so different from this. So much noise. Noise isn't always bad, Elara mused, but too much of it can make it hard to hear your own heart. Everyone needs a quiet place, dear. A place to feel rooted. She looked at the petunia cutting he still held carefully in his hand. Maybe that little bit of green can be your quiet place, even when you're far away. Her words were like a gentle balm, a quiet affirmation. She wasn't offering solutions to his problems, just empathy and a simple truth. He looked at the petunia cutting, feeling a surge of determination. He would make it grow. He would carry this small piece of Elara's garden, back into his noisy world. The weight was still there, but now perhaps he had a little bit of quiet strength to help him bear it. The thought of leaving brought a pang, but also a quiet sense of gratitude for the unexpected gift he had found. The time for departure had truly come. The long shadows stretched across Elara's lawn, and the first fireflies began to flicker among the bushes. John knew he couldn't put off his return any longer. Peaceful hours he'd spent in the garden had been a precious gift. A stolen slice of ordinary life. He turned to Elara, the petunia cutting, still clutched gently in his hand. Elara, he began, his voice sincere and a little heavy with emotion. I truly can't thank you enough for your kindness, for your garden, for your stories. This has been an unforgettable afternoon. He searched for the right words, wanting to convey the profound impact she and her garden had had on him, without revealing the truth of his identity. You've given me a kind of peace I haven't felt in a long, long time. Elara smiled, her eyes warm and crinkled at the corners. You're very welcome, John. It was a pleasure to have your company. Not many folks stop to truly look these days. Most are too busy rushing somewhere else. She reached out, her hand gently touching his arm. And thank you for listening sometimes. An old woman just needs an ear. He nodded, deeply moved. He was the one who was always being listened to, always on display. To be the listener, to be genuinely heard himself, was a novel and deeply satisfying experience. She then went into the house for a moment, emerging with a small, neatly folded tissue. When she unfolded it, a single, perfectly preserved pressed rose petal lay within. It was from the deep crimson, deep secret rose he had admired earlier. Its color still vibrant, its edges delicate. Here, dear, she said, carefully placing it in his outstretched palm next to the petunia cutting, a little reminder of the deep secret rose. Keep it somewhere safe, and when things get a bit too noisy or you feel lost, remember this little petal. Remember the quiet of the garden. Her eyes held a deep, knowing wisdom. Sometimes the most important secrets aren't shouted out, but found in the quiet places. John looked at the pressed petal, then at her. Profound sense of gratitude filled him. So strong it almost brought tears to his eyes. This small, fragile gift meant more to him than any diamond or gold record he possessed. It was real. It was given with pure love and wisdom. I will, he promised, his voice low and firm. I promise, Elara, I'll remember. He carefully put the petal and the cutting into his shirt pocket, close to his heart. He extended his hand, and Elara took it, their hands clasped for a moment, the calloused, gentle hand of the gardener, united by a brief, beautiful connection. Goodbye, Elara, he said, his voice husky. Goodbye, John, she replied, her smile unwavering. You take care of yourself, dear. And that little petunia. He turned and walked towards his car, not looking back until he reached the driver's side. Then he paused, turning to face her one last time. Elara stood by her gate, a serene figure framed by the vibrant colors of her garden. Watching him go, he lifted a hand in a silent farewell, and she returned the gesture. Then he got into his car, the heavy door closing on the peaceful world he was leaving behind. The engine purred to life, and he drove away, carrying the memory of the garden, the wisdom of its keeper, and two small, precious gifts that would forever remind him of the day he found peace in an unexpected place. John drove away from Elara's quiet street, the hum of the powerful engine, a stark contrast to the buzzing of bees he'd left behind. He glanced in the rearview mirror, watching her small house and the riot of her garden disappear from view until they were just a speck. The silence in the car was different now. It wasn't the empty silence he usually felt, but a silence filled with the lingering echoes of Elara's gentle voice, the scent of her roses, the wisdom of her stories. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out the petunia cutting and the pressed rose petal. He looked at them, then placed them carefully on the passenger seat. Like fragile treasures, they were more valuable than any of his possessions. They were a tangible link to a moment of pure, unadulterated peace. Back in his own world, the noise and demands returned almost immediately. His manager called frantic, asking where he'd been. There were calls from his band members, urgent requests from publicists. The famous name was whispered, shouted, demanded everywhere he went. But something had shifted inside him. When he finally got back to his large impersonal hotel suite, he didn't throw himself onto the bed or turn on the television. Instead, he found a small glass, filled it with water, and carefully placed the petunia cutting inside. He set it on the windowsill where he could catch the morning sun. Then he found a small, leather-bound notebook and carefully tucked the pressed rose petal inside its pages, marking it with a thoughtful Elara's rose. The memory of Elara and her garden became a quiet anchor in his chaotic life. When the crowds were too loud, when the demands too great, he would close his eyes and picture her kneeling among her flowers or sitting serenely under the weeping willow. He would remember her words about patience, about resilience, about finding beauty in the small things. He wasn't magically cured of the pressures of fame. The weight was still there, but now he had a secret sanctuary, a mental escape route. He started looking for green spaces, for moments of quiet even in the busy cities. He'd find a park, a botanical garden, and for a few precious minutes, he'd let the green soothe his soul, just as Elara's garden had. Meanwhile, Elara went back to her routine. She tended her garden, brewed her tea, and read her books. She often thought of the kind young man named John who had shown such genuine interest in her flowers. She didn't know he was a world-famous singer, the king to millions. She simply remembered his deep blue eyes, his quiet demeanor, and the way he had truly listened. He was a rare visitor, a gentle soul who appreciated the simple beauty of her world. Sometimes, when she was pruning her roses, she'd remember John's look of awe at the deep secret bloom. And she'd smile, knowing that sometimes the most profound connections happen in the most unexpected ways between two people who, on the surface, seemed to have nothing in common, yet shared a deep appreciation for the quiet, blooming secrets of a garden. John carried the echoes of peace, and Elara carried the memory of a kind stranger, forever linked by a sun-drenched afternoon and the simple language of flowers.